As the head of Iran's Quds Force, an elite force of the Revolutionary Guards, General Soleimani was a popular figure in Iran and spearheaded Iranian military intervention in the Middle East. The US labeled the commander and the Quds Force terrorists and accused them of killing hundreds of US military personnel. Then, in an early morning missile strike by an MQ-9 Reaper drone, authorized by former US President Donald Trump, the 62-year-old Qasem Soleimani and 9 other Iran-backed militia figures were assassinated at Baghdad airport. However, as easy and straightforward that may have sounded, that's not exactly how things actually turned out. In today's video, we will discuss the life and death of one of the most formidable figures to have walked the earth and the circumstances surrounding his death. Who was Qasem Soleimani? Qasem Soleimani is an Iranian major general who served as the commanding officer of the Quds Force from 1997-98 to 2020, an IRGC arm responsible for IRGC international operations. Born on the 11th of March 1957 in the province of Kerman in southeastern Iran, Soleimani grew up in a poor rural family, saddled by loans from Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi's modernization program. He started working at an early age to help clear the family's loan. He joined the IRGC after the Iranian Revolution, 1978-79. He was first stationed at Mabd, a primarily Kurdish city in northeastern Iran, where he assisted in the suppression of Kurdish rebels. Military accomplishments. After Ayatollah Khomeini, Soleimani was largely regarded as Iran's second most powerful figure. Soleimani was celebrated as a heroic national figure, as the Quds Force, an elite force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, reported directly to him and the Ayatollah. He served in the Iran-Iraq War, 1980-1988, including on the front lines and as a battalion commander training soldiers. He rose to the rank of brigadier general after the Iran-Iraq War and commanded a division in a drive to free southeastern Iran from drug cartels. He also assisted Afghanistan's Northern Alliance in its resistance to the Taliban when they first appeared in neighboring Afghanistan in the mid-1990s and began to take control of the country. He was designated commander of the Quds Force by March 1998. The Quds Force grew into an elite military squad for covert operations and expeditionary warfare, and eventually became the driving force behind Iran's influence geopolitically, spanning from Iraq to northern Levant under Soleimani's leadership. Not only did the unit continue to support Hezbollah in Lebanon, which it assisted to create in 1982, but they also backed Palestinian rebel factions like Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Following the 2003 US invasion of Iraq, a valuable opportunity presented itself for Soleimani to create a network of affiliations in Iraq. In March 2011, when the Arab Spring protests hit Syria, Soleimani, then a major general, convened with Syrian leaders to organize the uprising's repression. The Quds Force aided Syria's president, Bashar al-Assad, when the suppression developed into a full-blown civil war. By the mid-2010s, Soleimani's Quds Force had established a powerful influence in Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria, which Iran dubbed the Axis of Resistance. Assassination. Working closely with the Popular Mobilization Forces, PMF, in Iraq, Soleimani and the Quds Force was pivotal in the fight against the Islamic State in Iraq, ISIL, also known as the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, and the Levant. The Quds Force remained a powerful force in Iraq after ISIL was defeated. In October 2019, Iraqis rushed to the streets to protest the country's failing economy, corruption in government, and lack of progress, calling for the government to quit. Iraqi protesters soon began rallying against Iranian intervention in Iraqi politics, after Soleimani had a meeting with Iraqi officials to avert Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi's removal. They even set the Iranian consulate situated in Najaf ablaze. A paramilitary from the PMF alliance assaulted an Iraqi facility sheltering US forces on December 27, sparking a chain of events that heightened tensions between the US and Iran. Early Friday morning, January 3, 2020, a convoy of off-road vehicles departs Baghdad airport. In one of the vehicles is General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Foreign Division, the Quds Force, presumably the Iranian regime's number 2 cult leader and the mastermind of Iran's policy in the Middle East. Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the second in command of Iraq's most prominent Shiite militia, was among those traveling with the high-ranking Iranian officer and was killed as a result of the American strikes. In other contexts, his demise would have been a significant event in its own right. The drone strike came only days after demonstrators in Baghdad stormed the U.S. embassy, battling with U.S. troops on the site. According to the Pentagon, Soleimani gave his approval to the embassy strikes. Soleimani was assassinated by a drone missile while on his trip to Baghdad to visit Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi of Iraq. Soleimani was the Quds Force's commanding officer, one of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' 5 branches, and was regarded as the country's second most powerful figure, subservient to Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. 5 Iraqis and 4 Iranians were assassinated along with Soleimani. Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the deputy chief of Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, PMF, and chief of the Iran-backed Kataib Hezbollah militia, who was classified a terrorist by the US and the Emirates, were also killed. Soleimani and his men were responsible for the killings of hundreds of American and Allied military members, as well as the wounding of thousands more, according to the Pentagon. The strike took place during the crisis of the Persian Gulf from 2019 to 2022, which started after the United States rescinded the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran in 2018, reimposed sanctions, and accused Iranian officials of instigating a campaign to assault the US troops in the region in 2019. Soleimani became a glowing target on the US radar from the K-1 incident. The Iraqi K-1 airbase, which houses both US and Iraqi personnel, was bombed on December 27, 2019, murdering an American contractor. The United States retaliated with airstrikes in Syria and Iraq, killing 25 Kataib Hezbollah members. Days later, Shia militias and their allies destroyed the U.S. Embassy in the Green Zone. U.S. officials rationalized the Soleimani strike as necessary to prevent an imminent attack, but later clarified the legal justification as being carried out in reaction to an increasing wave of attacks, to safeguard U.S. personnel, dissuade Iran from carrying out extensive or sponsoring even more attacks, and to put an end to Iran's strategic escalation of attacks. Several experts, including a special rapporteur for the United Nations on the extrajudicial arbitrary executions, or summary, regarded the assassination as an infringement of U.S. domestic laws, as well as international laws. Iran described the strike as state terrorism. The Iraqi government even said that the attack violated its independence and sovereignty and was an act of aggression against its authorities, as well as a violation of bilateral security accords with the U.S. The Iraqi parliament voted in a non-binding motion on the 5th of January 2020 to evacuate all foreign soldiers from its soil, while Iran took the 5th and last phase of decreasing obligations to the 2015 international nuclear deal on the same day. The murder of Soleimani heightened bad blood between Iran and the United States. Iranian authorities pledged vengeance, while U.S. officials indicated they would bomb any Iran-backed paramilitary forces in Iraq they deemed a threat. Many people in the worldwide community were concerned and encouraged diplomacy and restraint. Iran carried out a series of missile attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq 5 days after the airstrike, the first confirmed confrontation between the U.S. and Iran ever since naval combat that precipitated the Vincennes conflict on the 3rd of July 1988. There were no further steps taken after the Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 was shot down during the escalated violence. Soleimani, Iran's most influential military figure, was considered the strategic brains behind the country's huge ambitions in the Middle East, and also the country's official foreign minister in matters of war and peace. As commander of Special Elite Forces, he oversaw covert operations throughout the region, employing a web of rebel militias. He also wielded considerable political power within Iran, ranking second in command to Iran's all-powerful supreme leader. He was widely known as the brains behind President Bashar al-Assad's war in Syria, the protracted struggle in Iraq, the war against the Islamic State, and numerous other battles. The silver-haired commander with the neatly cropped beard was a revered figure among his soldiers and the embodiment of evil among his adversaries. U.S. officials contemplated assassinating the cunning nemesis, who orchestrated strikes on their military and ridiculed them on social media for years. Some of their goals were aligned at times, such as in the war against the Islamic State, but they were still bitter enemies. Iranian leaders are unequivocal about the attack. This is an act of war that will be dealt with severe punishment. Iran has various options and means to respond, as a long-brewing crisis erupts into a dangerous new chapter. The significance of Qasem Soleimani's assassination. General Qasem Soleimani was regarded as the second most powerful man in Iran after Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and in his final years maintained almost untouchable heroic status, particularly among followers of Tehran's hardline policies. Soleimani had evolved into the architect of all of Iran's Middle Eastern policies and a prominent figure in all of Iran's foreign and defense policies since the Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 88, during which Saddam Hussein attacked Iran. Iraq, with the substantial aid of various Western countries, allied with Hussein to fight Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's Islamic State in Tehran, with remarkably the US providing Iraq with arms and intelligence. During the civil war in Syria, he was a vital ally of President al-Bashar. In the days following Soleimani's killing, Iran's authorities threatened shattering vengeance in places and at moments where the US does not anticipate it. Reactions to Qasem Soleimani's perceived influence in Iraq and overseas have remained a bone of contention among US officials. As US military authorities sought to discover more about the command structure of Iran-backed rebel groups operating in Iraq in August 2007, they received a message conveyed through the Iraqi Minister of State for National Security, stating that Soleimani wished to let them know that he was the sole decision-maker on Iranian activities in Iraq. Soleimani's assassination by the US on the 3rd of January 2020 exacerbated already existing tensions between Washington and Tehran. So what do you think about the United States' assassination of Qasem Soleimani? Please let's hear your thoughts in the comments section below.